Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our weekly Learn in Your Lunchtime webinar. I absolutely love doing this, and I love having Tracey on board. She's been a guest with us so many times before, and it's a thrill to welcome her back. And we're going to talk about everything relating to workplace readiness. As you know, the Student Success Coach community helps people like yourselves who are probably students or early on in their career. Perhaps you've been working for a while and you started to study again to improve your career opportunities. Really, whatever stage of your career that you are at and whatever studies that you're doing to try and improve your opportunities, we aim to help you and become successful students so that you can go on and have successful careers. And an important part of that is transitioning into the workplace. And we're going to spend the bulk of our time together talking about what it means to be ready for the workplace. And as always, please do post your comments and questions in the chat. But Tracey, let me hand over to you just to find out how you are, what's news in your world, and then let's dive into the world of workplace readiness. And remembering also we're into the second half of 2022. Can you believe it? The year is absolutely flying by. We're 2 years since the lockdowns of COVID, and I think hopefully we're past that. That's obviously impacted workplaces as well. But Tracey, over to you. Tell us how's your week been?
Thanks for having me.
What are we going to cover today?
I'm super excited about this. I've been asking Peter for a while now. When can I be on the show again? Come on, I'm missing it. So I'm happy to be back. Guys, as always, we love it when you interact. I enjoy people asking me questions because it also kind of steers me in the direction that makes me be sure that I'm giving you the information that you're looking for. And the other thing I really like is if you guys pop into the chat where you're studying, what you're studying, what year of study you are, because there are different elements to workplace readiness. Some things you could start to do in second and third year, and other things that you really want to be doing now if you're starting on your internship or your graduate job next year. So it's always good to kind of see, and feel free to ask questions, as I said, because then I can give you specific interactive advice. But in any case, you know what what I'm really enjoying about this is we've done a lot of talks about how to get ready to start looking for a job. Now we're approaching it from the perspective of how to get ready for that actual job and the skills that you're going to need in order to transition into your first job. And as I say, if it's the second or third year, it may even be an internship or VAC work. So the skills are kind of, you're going to use them throughout your studies.
Wonderful, Tracey. And I think that's absolutely such a powerful way to introduce this afternoon's webinar, because, the assumption is that you've, watched our previous webinars, you've done our courses. We've got courses on how to be successful in an interview, whether it's digital marketing, whether it's an IT role, how to stand out in a pack of CVs that a recruiter will get on their desk. Tracey's been a graduate recruiter for decades at firms around the world, and we packaged a lot of insights and learnings into previous webinars and courses, which you can go and take advantage of and which we're happy to share with you. But the assumption really is that you've sort of gone through that, you're successful now, and you are anticipating landing in the workplace. And it could be hybrid, it could be contracting, it could be full-time, it could be in a hospital if you've gone for a medical degree, it could be in a bank if you've gone the finance route. There's just such a wide range of options here, and Tracey's seen so many of them. So Tracey, let's dive into that now. And I know you've been involved in helping a lot of companies actually develop workplace readiness programs, because particularly since COVID, everyone is struggling with workplace readiness. It's not actually just those of us who've been in the workplace for 20 years like you and I. It's people even later in their careers. The workplace has changed, so we're all having to relearn what the workplace is, what it means to us and how it works, etc. So guys, just a reminder to put your questions on the chat. But Trace, over to you just to sketch for us, this topic of workplace readiness, and then perhaps at least to start working through the key elements of what that means from a general perspective, and then we can dive into specific examples.
And it's good that you mentioned that, Peter, because there really are some sort of specific skills that are pretty easy to achieve if you just know about them. It's sort of a little bit of, it's some tips. You guys have studied and you spent years learning technically or academically, but very little during that time of study prepares you for the actual job that you're skilling up to do. And it's incredibly hard because people don't always put an emphasis on it. They recruit you and they assume that you're going to be fine transitioning. Maybe they've been in the working world for a long time, and they don't remember how traumatic it is to move, to no longer be a student, to move to a different city, to start in an actual job. Little things like, not even really knowing what can I ask of the assistant, or can I knock at my boss's door and ask him a question, or is that not appropriate? So there's so many things that compact to make the starting of work probably make you think, I wish I was a student again. So as much as you are excited now to be earning an income, it's daunting. Please know that you're not alone. And like Peter says, I've been recruiting graduates for recruiting, training, developing graduates for about 22 years. So I've seen loads of classes of graduates come in over each year, loads of different interns, etc. And I've seen it for myself. In my previous company, it was really good because first of all, we had the recruitment and then we had the development side. But not a lot of companies have that, see the need for it, or have the capacity to do it. So once they sign the offer letter, the graduates would start work. In companies that do run a graduate program, which is why graduate programs work well, is that they help you with onboarding and they help you with the transition. They help you with managing the sort of interpersonal stuff. So I actually wrote earlier when I was making some notes, I said, a work-ready person has a set of skills, but these are kind of the softer skills, that sort of behavioral skills. And I really liked the way it says it's sort of almost teaching you how to interact. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a bit, Pete.
Oh, that's absolutely so powerful, Tracey. And let's dive in on that issue of how to interact and what it means to almost acclimatize into a workplace. There's always going to be a unique culture. There's going to be existing relationships. There's going to be established ways of doing things. Now, I know that in the last couple of years, for example, at the bank where I work, we've even hired people completely online through Teams interviews. And in many cases, they've started working and they've never come into the office, partly because they haven't needed to, or partly because that team's been allowed to organize themselves around a hybrid way of working. And hopefully we do have a lot more people coming back into the office. So whether you are able to have a chat at the canteen and pick up the vibe and the culture of the organization, or whether you are more reliant on digital connections with people, let's talk about the importance and the ways of approaching integrating yourself into the culture of a new employer. And what are those practical things, Tracey, that people can do to get ready for that? Whether it's researching the company, whether it's speaking to existing employees, watching a couple of our webinars, getting in touch with you. I've shared your website on the chat, etc. But let's talk about that interaction that you mentioned and the sort of acclimatization that you'll need to achieve in order to be successful in your chosen career.
I think the first thing to remember is, like I said earlier, you're not alone. And the second thing to remember is it's okay to ask. So coming in, a lot of the time as students or graduates, people aren't sure, they know they've been picked for this job and they're all excited and they're not sure if they're going to ask questions that are going to be seen as stupid, etc. My encouragement to you guys is communicate. So you can start, and we'll touch on this a little bit later. You can start, if you can get any means of job shadowing or engaging with the people that you're going to be working for before you start. That is so valuable. And often when people are hiring you, they would feel really chuffed to hear you say, okay, could I come in and job shadow one of the graduates in my team just to get a feel for how everything works? They would see that as a really positive thing. The other thing is, it's okay to say to your manager, remember they're a manager because they've chosen to be a leader. They're there to ask the questions. It's okay to soundboard things that you're thinking about with your manager. If you were to say, I am finding that I'm in this team, I don't really know anything. I'm not I'm not adding any value. I'm sitting there feeling awkward. How do you think I should handle it? The manager is going to actually be really inspirational to you in showing you different ways in which to handle it. Whether or not, remember, whether they're a good manager or a bad manager, let's hope they're good managers, but they've been in the workplace, they know that team. You're not failing by asking. The other thing is to ask your manager for feedback. So you can say, in that meeting, did you feel like I was contributing enough? Did you think I should ask more questions? These soft skills we talk about in workplace readiness are very, very closely linked with communication. So some of the other things are also, it's the unwritten stuff, or let's say the unsaid stuff. And that can be things such as interacting with peers or colleagues in a workplace, which is very different to how you would act with them at varsity, even though you may be emailing a colleague who is a fellow graduate, shall I say, and you may be inappropriate on the email, you may have even made a joke or whatever it is. You never know if somebody then has a bright idea to it and then forwards it to someone else without looking back at the email, and then you find you've got to do every sort of communication and email and engagement as if you're the professional in the organization, thinking that communication could always find its way into somebody else's hands.
Yeah, Tracey, you reminded me of an article that I wrote a while back called "The Most Important Question You Could Ask Your Boss." And, through my own experience, and, I think it's something that you've been alluding to, and what you were saying just now, is that we don't know what we don't know. And just because of the levels of work in organizations, that hierarchy gives people a greater perspective on the organization, either through virtue of their responsibilities or the time that they've spent in the organization. And your boss or a coach or a mentor or somebody else more senior in the organization is just going to have that perspective on the culture, on the relationships, on the networks, etc. So use that knowledge, but you have to initiate it. A very good manager might be proactive and reach out and say, I want to help you integrate into the organization. I remember when I worked at Accenture, our first day on the job, we were allocated a more senior person to mentor us and show us the ropes. And it was their responsibility to do that proactively. But I think in many organizations, you're going to have to take the initiative. You're going to have to ask those questions. And so the article that I wrote and that I'll share in the chat was to ask your boss, what are my blind spots? And I think, what you're alluding to is to say, what is it that I don't automatically?
I think that we may have lost Peter. I'm not sure if it's load shedding or whether you may have lost me. Let's see. I'm actually sitting in a very dark room thanks to load shedding. Okay, Peter's just sent me a WhatsApp saying load shedding. It's like he was saying earlier, it's we all just adapt to this whole new world of work. And it actually reminds me of earlier today when I was doing this presentation. So this is, my job. And I remembered that there was load shedding. So I jumped into an Uber and came and found a workspace, one of those shared workspaces. We all just become, we are all so adaptable because we have to be. And that's one of the many skills actually that we talk about in work readiness. Adaptability is a good one. So what people, and it's ever changing, it doesn't have to be ESCOM. It can be that a project changes. It can be that there's a restructure in the team. It can be the mandate that you've been given, a certain piece of work, and it changes. And I think the adaptability element is critical because people want to know that they know you can do the job, but they want to know that you can tread water when you need to, or that you, even if it's not ideal, you can, you can still make it happen. Now, how do you do that, or how do you prove that you're adaptable? Take a deep breath and know that in that moment when things, when things change and you're sort of taken unaware, take a moment to talk through it with a manager and just fully understand what the motive is for the change, and use that time to ask questions. And because once you understand the change, it's easier for you to accept it and to make the best of it. The other thing is, it was interesting earlier when Peter was saying, get a mentor, because that was something else on my list. I think it's really important, guys, when you start work to have, I would say, two mentors. I would say a buddy who is who is a graduate, maybe a year ahead of you. So if you're a grad and they were in the grad program the year before, and then to find a mentor who is somebody senior, ideally in a role that you kind of aspire to be in at some stage. So the buddy is someone you can go to and say, listen, this is what's happening here. Did you ever experience it? What do you think I should do? You can become friends. With the mentor, you can then go and bounce your thoughts. So you can bounce them off your buddy, and you can have a very interactive conversation, and then you could come up with some thoughts about how to solve or deal with, and then you communicate with your mentor and then get their feedback, and then remember to always go back to them. So they're not going to drive the relationship as your mentor. It's up to you to drive it. So you go back to them and you give them the feedback on how things have worked out, and they will hold you accountable for it. There's so much more than just going to work. So we think, find the job, arrive at work, and do the job and earn a fat salary. But there's so many other elements to you actually excelling in your career. And they really are about how you conduct yourself. And yes, Peter's back. Hello, Pete. And I see there's a question from Tiniko. Balancing work, school, and life. So I'm imagining now that you are actually already working. So I'm assuming. And I think that if anyone knew the answer to this question, that they could probably write books on it. I think it's a little off topic, but I'll tell you this. It's going to be having clearly, let's say, having structure. That took me a while to think about, sorry. It's having structure and allowing time for those specific things. And in actual fact, when we talk in this context of work readiness, it's going to be a big part of transitioning and making a good impression at work, and being successful is about being rigorous about managing your school and your sort of life stuff, that it doesn't impact your job. Because the moment that it does, straight away people are going to start to have reservations. No matter how good a job you're doing, it's a sad reality. There is not not a sad reality. I suppose if I was hiring someone, I wouldn't, it's not sad that I want to see them fully engaged, but it is reality. And so, yeah, the actual tips, Peter's got loads and loads of courses on work-life balance and structuring and effectiveness and all of the other things. So we'll share the links for those.
I'll definitely pop that into the chat as well, Tracey. And great just to get some feedback. So good to have you on the show today. Just wonderful insights that you've got there. Very beneficial conversation. Okwanda, great advice. Cedric, so fantastic, Tracey. And just to have access to your wealth of experience is incredible. Tracey, let's now I want to just, you've been a graduate recruiter, in big banks locally and internationally. So you'll have seen that full life cycle from the recruiter's perspective, right? You'll have seen the CV arrive in a pile of 100 or more. You'll have helped managers whittle down to maybe 10, 15, then you'll have seen those people rock up on their first day, and I know at the organizations that you worked, and because you were in those roles, you had a very structured process and you helped them go through it and you put a lot of things into place to support them. But what stands out for you in the people themselves and the things they did or didn't do that had the greatest impact on their career success? So you've seen them all the way through the CV stage, the interview, getting that offer letter. Yes, fat salary, people are excited, that's fantastic, but there's so much more to it, and they realize that sooner or later. And then now, often people I know that have stayed in touch with you 10, 15, 20 years later, some people are CFOs of big banks, some people are investment bankers doing $100 million deals, and you hired those people, right? They are so thankful. I've seen them. They are so thankful to you for the career coaching and the advice that you gave them. But my question to you now is, what did people do themselves that made them stand out? I know you've played a big role in many people's careers, and you're fantastic. We know that. But what can people do themselves to have the success that you've seen other people achieve in that life cycle of entering into the workplace?
So if I look back on all the years of the sort of campus visits I did, interacting with students on campus at whether it's career fairs or presentations, going to recruit bursary students or interns or graduates, there's always a huge volume. So there's a bunch of people. In my case, it was investment banking. There were a bunch of people from AXI and finance and engineering, etc., all wanting to become bankers. So we're talking about a huge volume here. And it's not like when somebody's more experienced, there's a lot of info on the CV to go with. When you're recruiting a student, you're actually going basically on what they studied, where they studied, what their marks are, and if they have some work experience. So you're getting, I remember screening 3,600 CVs one year. And what you've got to think is, if you were that recruiter going through this pile of CVs, what would you be looking for? What would stand out? There is, as I say, only a certain amount that a CV can hold. So how else can you stand out? You have to be noticed. You have to find a way to be noticed. And I'm telling you, year after year, there have been certain students who've engaged with me beyond just submit their CV. Whether or not it's arrive at the office with your CV at the reception, I'm not encouraging that at all, but these are some of the amazing stories that I'll write about in my book. But the other thing is, when you send the email, instead of just saying, I've applied, you want to say, I've applied, and you show you've done some research about the company, you've thought about a certain team, and you were wondering if there was any chance you could do some job shadowing, and not just emailing the recruiter, emailing people. Go and use LinkedIn. Go and research, go onto their website and go see some people within the organization. and go and pop them in mail and say, I've applied to the grad program and I just want to increase my chances. What do you think I should do? Please give me some advice. People love to help. But they're not going to stop and say, okay, let me go and tell the students that they should be doing this, right? You need to drive it, and I'm giving you guys permission. People, I don't think it's that you don't want to. I think it's that you, and I don't think it's that you don't think of it. I think it's that we almost feel like we're being irritation or wonder, oh, can I do that? And I'm saying you must do it. Stand out. There were times that I remember students, actually a few over the years, and interestingly, this was always at UCT, come to think of it, and I've recruited all the campuses, but it was quite common at UCT that one of the students would know that I was coming on campus, and they would either be there to greet me beforehand or come and wait to say hi afterwards, just to make sure that I had a face. And they can, it's still, I'm remembering now when I was first at Rand Merchant Bank, in the first sort of year of us having a grad program, all these like MDs now, I remember some of them actually standing in board shorts outside of the presentation room and saying, can I carry your bag to the car? I mean, I didn't need help carrying the bag, but I remember those kids because they were the ones I was chatting to. So I really, really believe that you have to find a way to be noticed. The rest will fall into place. You've got to make sure that your CV is the one that they're actually looking out for, rather than may come across or maybe screened out by an algorithm.
Yeah. Tracey, incredibly useful. And I mean, so great, important to stand out, to get the job and to get your foot in the door. And then, once those great people that you remember have started their careers, what was it, or what are some of the practical things that they did that quickly helped them integrate into that workplace and become ready for their career, that then also meant they were successful and continued to be noticed, etc. You obviously can't wear board shorts to work unless you are on a Zoom call, in which case you can wear your Zoom suit and then your board shorts as well. But seriously, though, in a workplace context, in 2022, let's continue on that theme of workplace readiness. What are the things that people need to be thinking about if they've got a job coming up and they want to make sure that they have the best possible chance of being successful? We've spoken about mentoring and coaching and asking questions and communicating as much as possible. Other thoughts on workplace readiness?
So if I look back again on the people who would start in the various grad programs that I've managed, if I look back on the ones that went on to really excel, there was definitely a strong element of these sort of softer skills. And rather than just coming in and doing the work, they would be very proactive. So after getting the offer, they wouldn't just disappear and for 6 months until they graduated and start work. They would actually ask to come into the office. They would contact someone in the team, their future manager, say, is there any pre-prep I can do? Are there any short courses you'd like me to do? Is there any reading I want to do that I should do? What do you think will help me transition into my new role? You won't believe that in a class of when I would hire 30, maybe only 1 or 2 would do that. The others would disappear. And I'm telling you that the managers are not going to say, oh gosh, they haven't been in touch. But if you do stay in touch with the manager and engage with them, they're going to say, wow, okay, I like this proactivity. The other thing is to say, especially now when people are doing interviews by Zoom, as we said, the other thing is to say, please, I'd like to visit the office in person before I start working. Some even say it before they accept the offer, but definitely before you start working, just to get a feel for the place, not even necessarily to meet everyone, but if you can meet people in your team, that's even better. Once again, you can get their emails and start to engage with them. The other thing is, if you, this is a good point. So as I say, I speak from an investment banking perspective and background, but I actually think in your final year of study, get your applications for grad programs in sooner rather than later. So often companies start recruiting in January. So get it done. Don't wait to closing date in July when everyone's trying to sign up, and a lot of the companies have already started to interview. So you don't get get those applications in, and then what you can do is find out if once you've got the job, then you've freed up not only to focus on your exams, but you can also find out from your future manager if there are other courses you could do. In banking, it was the CFA. So it was the CFA is for me the key qualification or certification to have between your studies, finance oriented, whether they are or not, and work as an investment banker. Or maybe it's an advanced Excel course, or there could be things like that. So free that period of time up to do any additional kind of studies. And then the other thing that I would say is find someone from your tertiary institution, ideally, who is working at the company in a grad position, and ask them questions. Have a coffee chat. Say you started. You were where I was a year ago, and when you started, what do you wish you knew? Like, what was there something that you did that made your transition easier? Or, those kind of things, that kind of thing is gold. It's showing that you're proactive and it's helping you, right? You can learn so much if you just ask.
Yeah, Tracey, that's all absolutely fantastic advice. And you mentioned the CFA. And I do presume that we probably got quite a few people on the call now that are in the finance domain. And, we have webinars, I think, on CFA and the CFA community that we're setting up. I know that you're aware of Jean Berger and his expertise and his reputation in the industry. Mm-hmm. So perhaps let's just lean in a little bit on the CFA topic, and that can help people with workplace readiness in terms of doing a couple of extra courses and becoming part of a CFA community. Even if you're not studying for the CFA, it's a world that I think if you can understand a little bit about it and watch some of our webinars and our courses, that's a good example of how somebody in finance can get ready for that financial workplace. So do you just want to touch on John Berger and the new community that we've spoken about on a couple of previous webinars?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something like the CFA, it's key what you've said, Peter. It's not even that you need to be doing it. It's whether or not you're doing it. You can join the community, you can join the Facebook page, and you can. I personally have also signed up for some because I'm always talking about the CFA, but I certainly, in an HR background, never needed to do the exam. And I found it so interesting. And it's not only about banking. It's if you're business oriented, or if you're entrepreneurial, or you want to run your own, whether you want to be in finance or otherwise. It's got really good financial skills that are invaluable. So I think it's one of your most powerful sort of offerings.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I have now put a link to one of our CFA courses in the chat, and we're able to offer free access for everybody into that course. And this one, so there's a number of different topics in the CFA, and there are 3 levels to the CFA. So we're releasing a range of courses on the different topics, but any one of them will give you that introduction into the CFA world and help you learn about it and make a decision about whether that's something you want to invest your time and your money into. And in those courses, John talks about how the CFA is the gold standard for the finance community. And even if you're not doing the CFA, it gives you access into a world that, in terms of getting ready for the workplace, is priceless. And with somebody of that experience and reputation in the financial industry, and the recommendation from someone like Tracey, who's seen the power of the CFA to help people become successful in their careers, these are opportunities and resources that you absolutely cannot pass up. But again, CFA a little bit more in the financial world. I've also sort of dabbled in investment banking over the years, never really managed to make a career out of it, but certainly have enjoyed networking with investment bankers and learning from them and what they do and trying to understand their world. And it's absolutely fascinating, because when John Berger was on our webinar previously, and we'll be talking about the new community that he's been setting up, he was talking about how he himself doesn't have a formal finance qualification. He obviously did the CFA, but he comes from a non-financial background. So the teaching style that he puts into his courses in his community actually is geared towards people that don't have that formal accountancy and financial training background. So even if you do, that's fantastic, but it's so accessible for so many people to start learning about this financial world. So I've popped a link to the course in the chat. There are only limited free seats there, but if you go into the course, you'll see a lot more about John Berger. You'll see lessons about corporate finance. You'll learn a lot more about this world that Tracey has been talking about, and which from a financial workplace perspective really can boost your career.
Nokwanda has a great question there, Peter. Do you want to highlight
it? Let's put that up on screen and go through it, Trace.
So, we do, with the student success coach, we do focus a lot on students. And so this is really good, because in this case, it's you have started work, whether it's via a grad program or an internship, and then have some time where you are unemployed. Study further, which is a great thing. If you're unemployed and you can study further to add to your skills, you're going to go in at a different level. So I think once you have been an intern and you have studied further, etc., I don't think you need an internship to get into a company. I think that you've now got skills and work experience, that an internship is that you should sort of aim towards an entry-level role. So it can be a junior role, but not necessarily entry-level as in straight out of varsity graduate. So in a case like this, Nokwanda, the other thing is people often feel bad when they haven't been working and they feel, how can I justify it? Is it going to look... But you can always say, I was retrenched or I resigned in order to study further. It's how you position it. In order to study further, and now given my previous work experience and my additional studies, I'm looking for a certain role. And you're welcome to pop more questions on, Nokwanda, if you want to elaborate on this. It's all about how you position it. You can say, I was retrenched, then I was at home, couldn't find a job, so I did some more studying, didn't know what to do. Or you could say, I studied, had some great work experience on an internship, then went back to study, and I'm now looking to put my studies and my experience into action in a new role. You can position it very nicely for companies like that. And you know what? I think also finding a job is hard anyway. So I think there's some feedback there, but anyway, finding a job is difficult anyway, especially when you're unemployed. You're very vulnerable. So, Pete, there's some feedback. I'm not sure if you can hear it. Somebody's on the call. I'm hearing things clearly down in Cape Town, in the dark. So I think that it's not a bad thing to say, okay, well, I can't find a job. Maybe I will settle for an internship. So I don't think that it's necessarily the fact that you aren't finding something because you aren't eligible. I think it's more that times are pretty tough and it's not easy to find a job right now. And I just think you must package it with more intent, or show that you have control over this. You decided when to resign, you decided to study, and now you decide to work again. This is all within your kind of master plan. Companies are going to be taken by that. They're not going to see it as a negative.
Yeah, wonderful, Tracey. That's just such powerful advice. And I think what we will do is have a follow-up, where we look then at the earlier stages of workplace readiness, and we can touch on, a little bit more detail around some of these questions that people have around, CVs and, interviews and getting a job, etc. Tracey, let's just talk about this hybrid way of working now. And I know that in our interview courses, we cover, how to interview well over Teams and how to make sure you've got the right setup and the right lighting and the right background and so on. And that's obviously to make a good impression with the recruiter and the hiring manager, etc. But I mean, what are you seeing now in terms of how much hybrid working is happening across different industries? And what should people be thinking about in terms of setting themselves up from home, or balancing that with going into work a couple of days per week? What are you seeing? What are your thoughts? What are your advice from a hybrid working perspective?
It's been interesting to watch. I don't know if you've noticed, Pete. So originally, everyone was very averse to this. It was seen as, indulgent to work from home, and, how would you even sort of dare thinking you could do? And then everyone was pushed into it, and suddenly people were saying, this works quite well. I don't know. I would love to see if there were studies around whether it's affected, or, productivity or so on. But I know that it went a long way to, I don't know, it's quite a good retention tool for your staff if you're offering them the option to kind of be at home. But now I'm noticing that companies are starting to, I don't know, change their tune a little, and there's encouragement to come back to the office, etc. And I'm dying to see how it all works out. But I do think that we should, whether it's COVID or ESCOM or whatever else it is, I do think we need to assume that there are going to be days that we have to work from home. And like myself today, like in an Uber, rushing around trying to find an office, I mean, that wasn't professional at all. And I've got years of experience, so there's no excuse. So I think it's really good. You're not going to be stressed if you know there's a certain area in your room where you can put up your desk, where there's a blank, unlike mine, a blank wall behind you. You've got a nice desk, you've got internet, all of these obvious things, so that when you do have to work from home, you are not held back by any issues, and you can show them that you're being as productive as if you were in the office. Right. So the other thing is also to remember that you finding the job, you're going to need often to have interviews online. But once you've got the job, you're going to have a range of interactions online, whether it's a group, team meetings, whether it's meetings with your manager, whether you guys are talking to clients, whatever. There's going to be elements of being online. So make sure that it's home from home. It's like your desk space at home, and whether you're there or not, your manager's seeing the same level of delivery. Okay, so that's important. The other thing I was thinking about, Pete, I was thinking about this, it was on my mind, this whole virtual thing, but now it's slipped my mind. Oh yes, I think it's so, the other thing is we all joke about it, and it seems so obvious, but it's so easy to mess up when you're online. And little things like somebody walking in, I was on a call last night with 8 people around the world, and then my child had their hand through the door waving a 10 rand note. And it's like, little things, we laugh about it now, but when you're a grad trying to make a good impression, or especially as a young person, sure, you want to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen. You also want to make sure things like, we joke about wearing a suit at the top and whatever, but suddenly something happens, you have to jump up and grab something, and you're wearing slippers. But those things all go without saying. It's just easier to mess up. So just bear that in mind and think, it's like everything. It's recorded for the rest of your life. It's like emails are there forever. If you mess up, you're not going to run away from it easily.
Yeah, Tracey, I think absolutely. Let's aim for that professionalism. But again, if something does go wrong, just apologize, right? I guess, I mean, people are also only human. And we've also seen, interviews on live television on BBC, where the little kids have walked in around the back and, they've managed to make a joke out of it, etc., I suppose. But 100% your point. And I mean, we have a whole communications course on how to communicate effectively in online meetings, in WhatsApp groups, on social media, on email, and in this entire new way of working that hybrid and COVID and lockdowns have accelerated, but I think to some degree was always there, and we all knew of people that were working from home or had to work at home in the afternoons, etc. But because the critical mass has shifted, I think it's now become a lot more the norm and created a lot more options than it was the exception previous to COVID. So Trace, maybe if I could just give my sort of thoughts from my perspective, it's certainly given organizations and teams a lot more optionality. And I think that where there's a lot of transactional communication, that continue happening online. So meetings that are very transactional and administrative in nature and don't need a lot of human connection and interaction and collaboration. Certainly the platforms that we have and that we're all used to now, I think you'll see those carrying on.
And there we go. Perfect timing for an example.
100%. So where you need that collaboration and interaction, and you need to stand around a whiteboard, or you need to learn body language, and maybe it's a more sensitive relationship building meeting that you need to have. I think where offices are making that provision for people to come back and workspaces that are conducive to that, I think you will see that become a lot more prevalent in the workplace. But again, Tracey, I mean, let me also just add a point that what is the value of sitting in traffic for half an hour or more, or 45 minutes or an hour? I mean, we've all seen with load shedding now, traffic is back. It's a nightmare, right? And then you spend the whole day in Teams or Zoom meetings with people that are not in the office, right? You might as well do that from your desk at home. And I think if you've got an employer that has that mindset, that's very positive. And then what you can do is schedule 1 or 2 days during the week where you make a point of putting your diary and your time into the one-on-one connection and the personal chats and having lunch or coffee or more in-person types of meetings. So I do think it's about a bit of planning. I do think it's about a bit of routine and a bit of structure that you need to build in. But very importantly, if you are just entering into a team and you're brand new in the organization or fresh out of varsity, you're still going to have to learn about what those norms and acceptable behaviors and routines are for your team or for the organization. And I'd like to go right back to what you said at the very beginning is ask, communicate, make suggestions, be proactive, make your ideas and your voice heard about what works well for you and how you can make the most contribution to the team and the organization, and then work out what that normality is, or that equilibrium that works for you and your team and your life and your family and the rest of your schedule. So Tracey, I mean, that would be my broad brushstroke sort of perspective on where we are from a hybrid working perspective.
Absolutely. And I personally find that, especially as a young person, you learn a lot from being around your colleagues, just hearing different people on the phone. And so I think that there's value, especially as a graduate, on having office time. But I agree, from a productivity perspective, it has to be, wasted time on your way to work, etc., whereas you could actually be at your desk. It surely improves productivity. And just make sure that your manager, they're going to trust you to work wherever, so long as they see that the work has been done. Don't leave them any room for to think, oh, well, I think that they should maybe be back at the office. I'm not sure. The other thing is schedule regular. Don't wait for your manager, your line manager to set up chats with you, and set up a weekly half an hour just to give them a report back on what you're doing. The moment they feel that you're engaged, then it doesn't really matter too much where you're sitting at the time.
Yeah, no, great insights, Tracey. Thank you. I think it's been incredibly useful for people. So there's a question here which I think we'll pick up in next webinar, because we do go into this in a lot of detail. But this whole idea of how to stand out in the recruitment process, we have a whole course on how to write a CV. And in that course, Tracey, you provide a CV template, and we offer that as an assignment to complete your CV in that template, send it back to us. We might be able to give you some feedback on that, but it helps you take action. It helps you produce a CV that's got a very good chance of being read and of standing out, simply because you've had the experience and you provided that template, and you teach people how to write a CV in that course. So Tracey, without answering this question, unless there are one or two tips you'd like to give now, let's just talk about the next follow-up webinar that we'll have, which will cover a little bit more the sort of earlier stage of workplace readiness, such as getting your CV ready.
Okay, so in actual fact, what I'm going to do is jump to Oratile's question, because it's a good one. And then I'm going to speak about CVs, just a general thought that I have to wrap. So in the case of your studies, including workplace readiness, there's a point to which a lecturer is going to be imparting technical skills and at the same time be able to ensure that you're ready to be in the workplace in every sense of the word, realistically. And there are quite a few professors. I saw Professor Aronson was on earlier from UWC. He's very active at getting people like me to chat to students, to help them with whether it's CVs or how to do the job search or how to negotiate an offer. But otherwise, the career centers are good at that. And if they don't offer it, it's okay to go and ask. So go and say to them, I would love, is there any chance that you guys could run? Those guys in the career centers are skilled enough to do this themselves with you. Say, would you be able to run 2 or 3 workshops dealing with, whether it's office politics or whether it's, communication skills or dealing with, resolution of conflict or, all of those things. Ask them to help you. So the other thing is there are, if you do some research, there is some YouTube videos that talk about the sort of 8 to 10 different skills that you need in order to be workplace ready. So it's quite nice to read up on that and to think about it and see where, it's just where you guys are young, you're starting out. People are not expecting you to be perfect by any means. I'm 22 years in and I still make mistakes in the office, or, I still drop balls and I still say things I shouldn't say, or come across intolerant at times. We're human beings. But this is just a really nice guideline of the sort of things that will make you be a good team member to have on a team. And then in terms of the CVs, yes, we can talk about CVs again. What I will say is I find most of my coaching clients come to me saying, I need help with my CV. Most. And I look at their CVs and their CVs aren't the problem. The CVs only tell a part of, remember I said that earlier, they only tell a part of your story. There's so much else. It's often the way in which people are applying or the things that they're not doing that is meaning that they're not getting the job. So the CV, Pretty much always, I'll say I don't do CVs for people. I just don't. There's loads of templates and things like that that are available. But what I say is, let's look at what you're doing with your CV, where you're sending it, how you're sending it, how are you following up, how are you. That's really the key when it comes to securing the job. The CV is only part of that.
Great, thank you, Tracey. And I've just put the link to the YouTube channel where you can subscribe and get access to all the webinars and top tips and coaching videos that Tracey and I have sort of spent a lot of time and effort on over the past couple of years. And if you just browse through the YouTube channel, I think, Tracey, as you were saying, you know, the tips and the value and the advice that you'll get on things like workplace readiness and CVs and interviews will be absolutely incredible for everybody. Okay, Tracey, I think, yeah, we've had a fantastic chat, lots of great feedback, a very good attendance today, which is fantastic. One or two load shedding issues from my side, but hopefully, as I sort of demonstrated to everybody, just keep going, just bounce back in. You know, life continues, the show will go on. Yeah. The reality of life kicks in, and it's about the adaptability and the resilience to those environmental circumstances that, from my perspective, has been very important in my career. And when I think about workplace readiness, it is that adaptability to different environments that is going to help you stand out. And like Tracey was saying, even more senior, older people in the organization don't necessarily have all the answers. We also rely on the younger generation and the millennials coming in to disrupt things and to show us the new way of doing things. And so speak up, have that proactive voice, have that confidence, have that adaptability to, you know, make a difference, because if your career is going to be successful, then the organization is going to benefit. So don't be, you know, intimidated and scared and hesitant, you know, rather be confident and proactive and communicate. But obviously mentoring and coaching and all the things that we've spoken about today are going to help you as well. Also, last thing from my side is, please, anybody in finance on the webinar today, join us in the CFA course. It will absolutely blow your mind. John Berger has an incredible way of teaching. And in that course, you'll learn more about corporate finance, but you'll also see his advice about CFA, about getting into CFA, about doing finance, and about learning more about that world, so you'll have the confidence, if that's your chosen career and your field. Fanani says, thank you so much. This has been so helpful. I'm a first year doing analytics. Great choice. Thank you so much. Tracey, last question. Let's just squeeze in one more question because we've got a couple more minutes. If you want to just answer Aratile's question, and then let's wrap up.
I mean, I think that as soon as possible is the high-level answer. But realistically, I think an internship is great for two reasons. It gives you exposure to the business to help you know if that's something you're really going to want to do when you graduate. And it also is a way of opening doors with companies so that maybe they like you and they're going to hire you. I think allow yourself to settle in your first year. You can go to career fairs, and there's so many other things that you can do. Go to your career center. And then I would say from about the second year, you want to, whether it's a formal internship at some companies or whether you just want to get some back work, or I think from second year, you could start to explore that. And in that case, I would go and find somebody who is a graduate in that company and ask if you can job shadow them, or even have a coffee with them just to hear about what they do. And then in third year, so I'm assuming honors, which isn't right. I just personally really support you guys doing a postgrad if you can, if it's within your means. But in your penultimate and final year of study, the companies are more inclined to take interns then because it's part of their recruitment. So then go flat out to try and get a 2 or 3 week work placement or internship with them. It is gold on your CV.
Great. Tracey, thank you. And Jackie says, thank you for an insight. Indeed, a productive session. Very much appreciated. Okay, guys, we're going to leave it there. Have a super weekend. join the YouTube channel, join the CFA course and Facebook group. And of course, I put the link to the Student Success Coach Facebook group and the website and Tracey's website all in the chat. So go and take advantage of those resources. It could make all the difference in your studies and your career. Tracey, thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Take
Bye-bye.
care, Pete. Bye.